I'm George Curtis. Welcome to It's Your Environment. Each week, it's my privilege to bring guests that teach all of us something about the environment. The environment is awfully important because we live in it or die in it or both. The environment's been in the news lately because we have begun to learn that we are capable of doing permanent damage to the environment. Yet there are some places that we haven't ruined yet, but we're working on it. One of my favorite places has always been Alaska. And I met somebody within the last week who I'm very jealous of. It's his favorite place too, and he's able to go there every summer and work in the fishing industry and appreciate the last somewhat unspoiled frontier of our environment, and I can't wait to hear about it. Our guest's name is Aaron Seaman. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, you told me before we got started that while you're an Alaskan, you really started out Oshkosh, Wisconsin.
That's right. Yeah, Oshkosh native, and I went to school here. I eventually meandered up to Alaska, but there's a lot of stories along that way too.
Well, tell us what interested you in traveling toward the ocean and ultimately Alaska.
You know, I think it was just something I've always wanted to do. I've always, even from a little kid, I've seen books about Alaska and just the allure of it being so remote. So when I graduated high school, right out of Oshkosh West here in town, I went to college and I just wasn't happy. I was floundering. So eventually it was a spur of the moment decision. I quit my job, I quit school, and I packed what little things I had. And back then I had a 1996 two-wheel drive Chevy S10, and I just drove straight to Seattle and started walking the docks.
Well, that's an interesting trip in itself, and that's probably the best way to get to the ocean. Then what happened?
Well, so when I got to Seattle, this is how naive I am. I don't even really know if I want to say this. I thought that was on the coast back in the day. So luckily, I was at Fisherman's Terminal in downtown Seattle, and eventually I got on a boat. We were doing a lot of prep work on the boat. It was an albacore tuna boat. And lo and behold, one morning before we ever even got to fish it, it got seized by U.S. Marshals. So everything had to go up on the dock, and I watched the boat that I had been living on and working on for the past month be towed away. So after that, I started working construction out in Seattle for a little bit. And I made enough money, and I drove home, tail between my legs. And I vowed to go back, so I spent the winter back here. And then that spring, I drove right back to Seattle, and this time I got on a different tuna boat out of Seattle. And I wound up in Newport, Oregon, and I was hooked. I had done a season of albacore tuna off the west coast, and then I started Dungeness crab fishing off of Newport, Oregon for a couple years.
Well, that's interesting. So that you've been a crab fisherman before you got up to Alaska eventually.
Yep.
What kind of equipment do you use to catch crabs? Well,
and it's funny, the Dungeness season's just getting underway in Newport right now. I still kind of keep track of it, but you use like a round crab trap, crab pot, and then you have, your block, which is the pulley that pulls it up, and then, these pots are still small enough to where we hand dump them, all the crab out, we don't use the crane or anything like that. So I did that for 2 winters, and then, lo and behold, a lot of this is just a very coincident fate type thing. I was in a hotel bar in Portland, Oregon, waiting to get picked up to go back crabbing. And I met a gentleman that had a brother that owned a gill netting salmon boat up in Alaska. So I gave him my number, not thinking anything would come of it, of course. Sure. And a couple days later, his brother called me and asked me if I had ever wanted to go to Alaska. And I said, I absolutely do. So he hired me over the phone to come up that summer, and that was kind of the beginning of my gill netting journey almost 17 years ago now.
And when you went to Alaska, what part of Alaska did you go to?
So originally I was supposed to meet him in Anchorage, and he was going to fly me down to the boat in his Piper Cub. Plans had changed, so when I got to Anchorage, he called me. He said, well, I'm already down at the boat. I have a ticket waiting for you at the counter, which I was pretty nervous. I kind of thought maybe I had been taken.
Sure.
But lo and behold, there was a ticket waiting, and then we flew into my first year with him. I was in Dillingham, Alaska. So that is the northern part of Bristol Bay.
And I'm quite familiar with Dillingham. In fact, I think that the Kuskokwim River kind of enters Bristol Bay very close to Dillingham. Am I correct?
I believe so, yeah.
All right. And so that was your first season. What did you do?
So my first season, since I had a little bit of experience, he had hired me to be the deck boss chief engineer. So my job was to all back deck operations, because we had 2 other greenhorns on the boat. And I had never gill netted, but at least I had been a fisherman for a couple summers. So, I was in charge of making sure the net was set safely and picking the fish and mending the net, because a lot of times it'll get torn up during the fishing day, and doing all the offloads and stuff like that.
Well, now you've been raised in Winnebago County. Apparently your family has had the property in Green Lake County, and you're familiar with this area. Mm-hmm. Tell our audience a little bit. It looks different when you get to Alaska. What kind of terrain were you seeing there, and how would you distinguish it from what we have here?
Sure. I mean, there's parts of Alaska that I think are very similar to around here. If you go north of Anchorage, the Matsu Valley and whatnot, it seems very similar to me. But where I'm at in Bristol Bay, it's some of the most beautiful places once you're out on the ocean. But when we're in the boatyard, a lot of people think it's more the postcard of Alaska, but it's really not. Our boatyards are generally just large gravel areas in the middle of nowhere where all these boats are put up on blocks and stilts, and then you get them ready to go, and then once you hit the ocean, you're on the ocean for most of the summer, unless you have a breakdown and you need to come in for some reason.
Well, that seems to be a good time for our first break, because when we come back, I'm going to be asking you some questions about the work itself.
Absolutely.
The danger and the reward. We'll be right back. Welcome back to It's Your Environment. I'm George Curtis, and my guest is Aaron Seaman. And like many of us, probably thousands of us, he had the dream of going to Alaska without having been in Alaska. It was an adventure that seems to attract young people, and has for over 100 years. But he did it. And when he got there, he got some surprises and got a job in the ocean off Portland and Seattle for a while, eventually got to Alaska itself, and a ticket. What did you find when you got to Bristol Bay?
Sure. My first year in Bristol Bay was basically, I owned the clothes on my back and very little money in my wallet. So I eventually had taken a cab from the airport, and they just dropped me off in a boatyard with hundreds of boats. So I walked around with my gear until I found the boat, and we got it ready for the season. It took us about a week of just maintenance and preparations, and then we splashed into the water. Usually they have these big tractors that'll pull the trailer and dump you into the water, and then it was game on almost from the beginning.
And how many people on the crew?
So that year we had the skipper, and I was one deckhand, and then we had 2 more deckhands. So there was a total of 4 people on the boat.
And what does the deckhand do?
So we're basically responsible for everything but driving the boat. A typical day, the fishing game will come on the announcements twice a day on the radio, and they'll tell us the hours that we get to fish. So if the fishing's good, you have 2 opportunities a day. It might be 2 8-hour periods, or sometimes it's even 2 10-hour periods. And you set your net, and it depends if you're fishing the line, which is usually a boundary line on your GPS. There's hundreds of other boats within a few feet of you, so it can kind of get to be like bumper cars of the ocean, and nets get tangled, and tempers flare when you're trying to reel in a net with, say, 5,000 pounds or so of salmon in it. It can get a little dicey.
Well, when you make your whole year's income in a matter of a few weeks, it's pretty intense, isn't it?
It absolutely is. I mean, there's a lot of these guys that's what they do for the year. So, and in fact, the majority of your fish is caught during the peak of the season, which is around the week of the 4th of July. So you might put on, over half of your year's poundage in 4 or 5 days. So it's a pretty much a 24-hour-a-day thing by the time you deliver and get ready to go back out. There's very, very little sleep sometimes.
It's a big gamble.
It sure is, and over the years, it's paid off. And there's been some times, the first year I ran my own boat, it was a disaster. It was a learning experience. I had bought this boat sight unseen, so when I got there, I had about a week to basically put the entire boat together and get it running. And there was a lot of people that kind of laughed at me, thinking that it was never going to work, but we got her, and we fished it that year. It just didn't go very well.
And you have to hire people that are available.
Yeah.
There's competition to hire them, so you might get somebody who isn't as represented.
Absolutely. Over the years, I've worked with a lot of people that I think embellish their skills. And
well said.
It's quite apparent within the first couple hours that they don't know what they're doing, and that can be a very dangerous situation, because on a boat you don't want somebody that you can't trust. I have to be able to trust everybody basically with my life at some point. So
absolutely, there are lives lost every year in fishing, in construction, and often the life that's lost isn't the person who made the mistake.
Yeah, that's very true. It's usually the one that just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Yeah.
I don't know of a more dangerous occupation than being an ocean fisherman.
Yeah. Over the years, I've been pretty fortunate. I've only had what I would consider one major injury. We were offloading. So what we do is we offload to the giant crab boats, and they're on anchor, and we're a 32-foot boat, tied next to a 100-foot boat. They're not rocking in the weather, but we are, and we're slamming into them. And I was going to untie our bow line, and I untied it, and a wave pushed us against their boat, and I started to fall overboard in between the two boats. So I dropped down to my knees, and I'd taken a boat tie-up cleat right to the kneecap. So that was probably the worst injury I had. I probably didn't kneel down on that knee for a few years after that. It was pretty rough, but it was a typical day.
And there isn't a medical center on the end of the dock.
No.
Sometimes it takes boats and planes and days to get to serious medical attention.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have the Coast Guard. I mean, they're amazing. If it's a serious enough situation, they'll get you the flight for life. But luckily, we've never had to call it on any of my boats. So I've seen it, and it's never a good thing to see that flying over when you know that somebody else is in big trouble.
And you're working out of a geographic city. What is the city that you would consider yourself located next to? Yeah,
sure. Our boat's located in Naknek, Alaska. I like to think it's like an Old West gold boom town, because for a few months in the summer, the population swells incredibly with people from all over the world coming to make their fame and fortune. And then in the off season, I would imagine it's down to maybe 100 residents. So,
okay.
There's not much there.
And as I recall, I haven't been in that particular village, but most of them, the architecture is a little bit iffy, run-down shacks. It's amazing that people can winter in them, not a lot of facilities. What kind of conveniences and professional services are available there?
I mean, it's changed a lot over the years. I remember when I first got there, you'd be waiting in line at a payphone to call home to say you're okay. And, lately we have cell phone service, and there's actually a gas station with a few conveniences. I wouldn't call it a quick trip, but we've definitely improved a little. When we're in the boatyard, we actually have the place that we contract our storage through. there's a building where we have showers and whatnot because we don't have a shower on our boat or anything like that. So we have a few creature comforts, but it's still pretty rural.
Well, can you drive to that town, or is it just by
No.
boat or airplane?
Boat or airplane. So they'll get their barge of supplies in the spring, and that's where, you know, the barge for our cannery brings all my supplies with my food and my parts for the boat. And if they don't have it on the barge, yeah, it's got to be planed in. So, you know, you better prepare well, because getting parts mid-season can sometimes be the end of your season.
Well, I remember the difference between airplane eggs and boat eggs. They taste a lot different. They're probably 3 months difference
Sure.
in age, too.
Yeah, fresh produce is a rarity. One of the first things I like to eat and drink when I get off the boat is a nice green salad and a glass of ice cold water, because believe it or not, the water tastes a lot rustier than normal when you're on the boat, and good clean glass of water goes a long way when you're done.
There will be many people watching and sharing your adventure, and we have one more segment, and I'm going to give you a chance to be a salesman for the Chamber of Commerce of Alaska to tell these people why they should stop thinking about it and do it.
Alrighty.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to It's Your Environment. I'm George Curtis, and my guest is Aaron Seaman, and I think I should take just 30 seconds to explain how I met Aaron.
Sure.
I saw an ad in the Winneconne paper for Ella Fish, which is a name I'd never heard of before, and the advertisement was for sockeye salmon. And at our house, we eat fish almost every day that we can. We just love fish. And so I answered the ad, and I talked to your wife, Shannon, and she told me that you were a local guy that fished commercially in Alaska, and you'd been doing it for years. And I got excited because Alaska's been in my blood for over 70 years, and called, and I said, would he be willing to be on the television show? And here you are.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I'm glad you made the call and the connection.
Well,
Yeah.
I am too, and I bought a little fish, and it was great. And our producer, Ron Bullock, has had fish. I shared it with him, and he thinks it's great, and he wonders when I'm going to buy some more.
Yeah.
But at any rate, let's take the last segment to give you a chance to tell people what you think is special about Alaska and important about Alaska, and why they should look into it further.
Sure. I mean, for me, it was just a lifelong thing. I don't know if it was just my calling or whatnot, but, you know, every year when I get there, you know, pre-season, you're kind of dreading it. Like right now, as I'm a little older and I have 3 kids, you know, it's always in the back of my mind, you know, I'm going to be building my crate real soon, because that has to leave in April to get on the barge to get up there in time. But every year when I get there, I realize why I do it. You know, it's some of the most beautiful terrain. And for the dreamer and the wanderer, it's magnificent. It's the last frontier. You know, so and every year I see that a lot of the same guys. The camaraderie is just amazing with there's 3 or 4 of these guys that, you know, we grew up together up there. You know, we were all young deckhands running around town, and now we're all boat owners. So it's pretty special to me.
Well, you've described the physical beauty, the challenges, the safety, the rewards, the defeats, the unfortunate things that happen. But I always thought, and I've been back there maybe a dozen times, Alaska is the state of the mind. It's different. Different people with different views, different values. Don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. I have a few friends that are residents, and it's kind of the running joke that you're Alaskan. You know, you don't feel like you are part of the lower 48. You're not, you know, United States. You're an Alaskan, and that's very true. Most Alaskans are such a diverse group. I mean, people from all over the world. Or I've met some of the most interesting characters, good or bad, over the years. It's just I think it's a calling that a lot of people have, and a few answer it, and a lot of people just leave it up to their dreams, but I guess I was the fortunate one to follow through.
Well, and you got the addiction.
Absolutely. Yeah. I will be doing this until I can't. So my goal is to pass this on. Yeah, I really hope my kids eventually will inherit the permit, because that's a big deal. The permits for this fishery are limited entry, so I think there's only roughly 1,700 permits in the world, and they're never going to make more. So I'm very fortunate to have one and to be able to pass that on to my kids.
But when you come home is Winneconne.
Yeah.
You have a wife, Shannon, a delightful lady that I had an opportunity to talk to briefly. 3 youngsters, and you're a teacher.
Yeah. So I teach 8th grade science, and in fact, I've taken a few former students up with me fishing. So I get to meet them when they're in middle school, and then they keep in contact throughout high school. And when they graduate, if they still have that urge, it's worked out to where I've had a couple of my former students working for me in the summer.
Tell me a little bit about your travel to Alaska, because I encourage people to go to Alaska, whether they want to use the train as far as they can, use boats, go up the Inside Passage.
Oh, yeah.
Which is my favorite trip in Alaska. I've driven both of the highways multiple times. How do you go, and what do you recommend?
I guess I go the more boring way, or the more traditional way. I usually just fly out of Appleton, and it's never a short journey. I think from the time I leave Wisconsin till the time I step foot on my boat usually takes about a day and a half with layovers and whatnot, and sitting in Anchorage for a little bit. I would love to take a boat there someday. I haven't. I guess that opportunity may have passed now, but.
Well, maybe not. I got a short ride with a cannery tender full of salmon, headed back to Seattle from Kodiak, and found out I get sick on the ocean when the waves are 20, 30 feet high.
Sure. Yeah.
And after 3 days of vomiting, and we stopped for a little water in Yakutak, I got off the boat and flew back and down to Seattle, and then took the train back. But there are many ways of going to Alaska and coming back, and driving is certainly one of them, but it takes time. Taking Amtrak out to Seattle takes time. Beautiful scenery.
It sure
you
does.
can go up the Inside Passage, which is just a wonderful trip. That's part of the Alaska highway system. And you'll stop at every village, and you'll see the villagers go on to the boat because they're going to the next town to see the dentist or visit Dad who's in jail.
Sure.
And that's so scenic, great food, inexpensive because it's a part of the Alaska highway system.
Yeah.
Trains, when you get in Alaska, they have wonderful trains.
They do. I have a few friends that have taken the train up to, is that Talkeetna, to the base of the mountain. I've never done that. Unfortunately, after the season, I always wanted to stay up, but then home's calling, especially now with, my wife being at home, running everything with our 3 kids. But when I was younger, I did fly from Anchorage to Seattle, and I took the Amtrak back to, I think it was Columbus, Wisconsin. It was an experience. It was one thing that I always wanted to say that I could do. Yeah.
Well, you have lived what most people here in the Midwest just dream about.
Yeah. I'm very fortunate.
Well, you're not just fortunate. You've got to take a dare.
Yeah, absolutely.
It takes a little bit of edge and a little bit, why the hell not?
Sure. Yeah, that was a lot of the beginning of my career. What do I have to lose?
Absolutely, and you don't regret it.
No. No.
Well, I think that you've recharged the dream for many people, and I hope more and more people do what Aaron did, and that decide this is the year.
Yeah.
This is the year, even if I go up there to work in the park.
Absolutely.
Or do something else. But this is the year to go to our biggest state, our most interesting state, our most exciting state. And people don't understand how big it is. If you cut Alaska in half, Texas would be the 3rd biggest state yet.
Absolutely. I mean, the vast wilderness of Alaska. I don't know how that can't draw you in. I mean, some of the scenery I've had the pleasure to see, most people only see on a postcard.
Well, congratulations, and thank you so much for sharing this with us.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity.
I hope to have you back again.
Absolutely.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen.